Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have a super rad guest for you guys today. We have someone who is called the Hillygoat. That may give many of you hints if you follow her on Instagram. But she is amazing at climbing steep mountain terrain. She has her master's degree in neuroscience and physio, as well as structural biology. She's a running coach. She's a gravel cyclist. She's taken first, second, third, and all kinds of things. Speed Goat 28K, Speed Goat 2-day challenge, the San Juan solstice. And then she just recently took 14th at UTMB. We have Hillary Allen for you guys today. So thank you so much for joining us, Hillary.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we would love to get a little bit of background on you and how you got into running. But before we do that, we are implementing something new to the show for you folks. We gave a little bit of background on Hillary, but we are implementing 2 truths and a lie. So Hillary is going to tell us 3 things about herself. One of them is going to be a lie, and Nia and I are going to have to guess, and she's going to disclose it at the very end of the episode. So I will let you deliver the 3 facts, Hillary.
Okay. So, number 1, I hate bugs. Number 2, I have a degree in organic chemistry. And number 3, I wrote my first book when I was in kindergarten.
Ooh, okay. I kind of feel like you like bugs just because I listened to your book and you like nature, but Nia, what do you think is the lie?
I was going to agree with you just because you do have a lot of experiences out in nature. So I feel like you probably like bugs.
Okay.
I can't tell you yet.
Yeah. Fingers crossed we're right.
Sure.
You guys, listeners are going to have to wait and wait for the answer at the end. But Hillary, how did you get into, ultra running, trail running? Like, how did all of this happen? Take us back.
Yeah. So, and I'll give a little bit of a background, like from the different styles, because I think it can be kind of overwhelming when people think about trail running. Usually they just think about something that's off of the road, which is true. But I basically got my start in running in general when I was in graduate school. So while I was, studying neuroscience and physiology, I was using running as just a means to just blow off steam. And so I ran my first marathon. And then I wanted to break 3 hours in the marathon. So once I did that, I was kind of just like, I am over this. I hate road running. And actually I had a coach at the time, and every Sunday she'd prescribe me my recovery run, and she would have me do it on the trails. And that quickly became my favorite run of the week. And so I became really curious with trail running, and the more I went on the trails, the more I met people, and I just became curious about it because I didn't really know that you could run on trails. I thought they were just for hiking. That's what I did growing up.
Yeah.
And so basically I kind of jumped in the deep end. I got really interested in trail running. I ran my first ultra, which is basically a 31-mile race. Shortly after my first marathon, but then I was in really busy in grad school. So I kind of had to take a break. But then the very next time I started trail running, I kind of figured the more I started trail running, I figured out I had this knack for uphill running, hence the nickname Hillygoat. Yeah. And so I was just drawn to these races that boasted the steepest terrain in the shortest amount of mileage. So wow. I did this thing called Skyrunning, and I was in the ultra distance. So basically Skyrunning is a race which is about 31 miles, and it climbs anywhere between 12,000 feet to 14,000 feet. And of course of those 31 miles. And then it also descends that too.
Wow.
So these races are, in the US, there's commonly at ski resorts, Speed Goat is one of them. Run the Rut is one of them. There's some in Flagstaff, or people maybe heard of Broken Arrow Sky Race. But basically my first season racing this in 2014, I won the US SkyRunning Series.
Wow.
And so I figured I had a little bit of some talent. And then the prize for winning was basically I got to compete in a World SkyRunning Series. And that's where I got to hop over the pond and start competing in Europe. And then basically I've been focused on skyrunning races and more of the steep mountainous technical terrain ever since.
Wow.
And then I've run, longer races. You mentioned UTMB. That race is 108 miles and has 31,000 feet of gain. So,
oh my goodness,
I like the steep stuff. Yeah. Basically.
How long does something like UTMB take you?
Well, I had a bit of a rough year this year, but it takes you anywhere between 24 hours and I mean, the cutoff for this race is 46 hours. It took me 29 hours this year to do, and I was just outside of the top 10. But yeah, so it was, it's a full day out there. And it was my birthday this year for UTMB. So that was cool.
Happy belated birthday.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What a way to celebrate it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's so many things I want to dive into here. I mean, talking about how do you fuel for 104, 103 miles is going to be a conversation for sure. But I do also want to mention for the listeners too, Hillary Allen is an author. She wrote a book, you guys, and I actually highly suggest getting it on Audible because she reads it. So it is, it's a book that will make you laugh, but it would also give you like full body chills. So it's really incredible. But she tells about her journey, and I'll let you tell it because there was a very like pinnacle point in your career that sidelined you. And I'd love for you to share on that. Yeah.
So thanks for the book plug. So, like that goes into maybe, my two truths and a lie. Well, but so basically, so I described this, like me getting into the ultra running scene. And what I didn't mention is I've always been an athlete. Like I played tennis in college and I've always been super athletic, but, trail running it was something that I just fell in love with, and I felt I had a knack for it. And it was just something that made me feel so whole and complete. And so once I finished, I actually decided to master out of my PhD program. So I earned my master's, and then basically I took a chance on running. And ever since, I signed with the North Face in 2015, I basically every summer I would pack my bags and I'd move to Europe and I would race in the Skyrunning World Series. And it was my goal to become one of the best in the world. And so in 2017, so only 2 years of doing this, I was actually ranked number 1 in the world for
oh my goodness
Skyrunning. Yeah. The ultra distance. I was having like the season of my life. But then basically everything changed in an instant. So I was at this race in Norway. And it's a very technical race. I mean, commonly in these sky races, you're running on ridges because that's just like just the most direct way to get to the top of the mountain. And it's the type of terrain I'm comfortable on. I train on it, but mountain running and trail running, it's not without risk, right? Nothing outside or, nothing in life is without risk, but if you train and you develop skills, it lowers those risks, but it's never at zero. And for me, basically it happened when I, was halfway through this race. I ended up stepping on a rock, which gave way underneath my foot.
Wow.
And I was, on this ridgeline that was pretty exposed, and I couldn't correct myself. And so 1 minute I was running and the next minute I was falling.
Wow.
And in total, I ended up falling 150 feet off of this ridgeline in the middle of the race, had a helicopter rescue. And that's where chapter 1 of my book starts.
Yeah. She dives right in, you guys, in the book. It's pretty incredible, your story. And you did a great job explaining it. And to mention, as I'm listening to your book, I'm like, holy smokes, you were conscious the entire time.
Yeah. So that was actually quite alarming. I actually had to, it's still a dream that I have actually.
Wow.
It's very vivid. And it's like, it's true what they say that the world slows down for sure. That's what I experienced. But yeah, it was,
that's wild.
it's like when, people describe life-changing moments, that was definitely it for me.
Definitely. Yeah.
And the whole purpose of me writing this book was to share my story, but not as a means of like a recovery story. Like, this is what you do to get back to running.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously survived. I was lucky enough to survive, and I'm still running now. But that was very uncertain. And I wanted to have a voice, to show people that even if all the odds are stacked against you, that if you believe in yourself just a little bit and you keep on doing that every day, that you can still accomplish amazing things.
Totally.
And I think that's applicable to more than just running, right? It's applicable to many challenges that we face. So
yeah, definitely. That it's an area I want to dive into with you, because we see not necessarily that exact situation happen with athletes, but we see athletes get injured quite often. And it's something where I think I wanted to kind of dive into with you is like, with that situation happening, obviously there was a lot of things that needed recovery in your body at that time after that situation, but what changed in your nutrition and like recovery world? Obviously I imagine there was PT and stuff like that, but did you change nutrition, or was that even a thought in the mind at the time, or what was that like?
And actually, it's funny because like I got into running in my mid-20s, and I think a lot of people they're just like, you feel invincible and you recover fast and you do all this other stuff, but like, and not until something happens that you start to think about all these other things that affect your recovery. And nutrition is one of them. In fact, my father is a PhD scientist. He researches like food science, human nutrition, how that affects like the body. So these are conversations
amazing.
I've been having since I was a little kid. And so we're a very sciencey family.
Love it.
But basically, I think another mistake that athletes make is thinking that if you're injured and you're doing less, that you need to eat less. And that was definitely not the case. Like, I remember the amount of calories and just energy that you need to help repair even one broken bone is incredible. Yeah. And I was healing 14 as well as like some ligaments. And so actually nutrition and sleep and PT were the first three things that I was looking at. And so I was trying to look at, just nutrient dense foods, really listen to my hunger cues, but then also like give myself the extra stuff it needed, because like I was eating a lot of bone broth soups, or like cooking like stews in bone broth, things that would kind of help with those like extra collagen, just giving myself my body extra stuff just to like, just so maybe it didn't have to like, break things down or make it itself. And I think that made a huge difference. And that's something that I've actually carried with me, since that accident. I've had other injuries, but also just in like, so in recovery, but also just in daily life, like how I view nutrition from just a whole food and nutrient point of view, as opposed to, so just like kind of getting in what my body really, really needs. And that was a pivotal point for me.
Yeah. I love to hear that, because I think people do run into that. Well, I'm not training as hard because my foot's in a boot. And so I'm just like going to eat less, or, I'm going to completely exclude carbohydrates from my diet. And, I think
not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's always good for people to hear it from somebody else, somebody else's mouth than mine. So, I appreciate that perspective. So, with, and kind of on a similar note too, were there any supplements or anything you implemented to help with that recovery process?
Yeah. So actually, my really good friend, Teddy Bross, he's a doctor. And so I was talking with him, and so we're kind of like on this anti-inflammation. So it's like tart terry juice, turmeric, just trying to eat anti-inflammatory foods. Like I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. So just kind of keeping that up. Perfect. And then, just kind of supplementing with just some extra little things. He gave me this whole like laundry list of things to do. And it's actually something I still tried to keep on top of now. Like it just like kind of putting some extra stuff in my recovery drink. And I also was very fortunate that Kelly Newland, I'm not sure if you know her, but she is a founder of Real Athlete Diets. It's called RAD here in Boulder, Colorado. And because I couldn't cook because I broke both of my arms. So she was helping me like, making some, like giving me some stock of these bone broth soups and like these really good things. She's like, okay, like she knows like what's like, that's the reason why she has her own like catering company, is because she knows the nutrition. So she was helping me with that and then giving me ideas of what to cook. So I was really lucky with the community that I had.
That is amazing. Yeah. And in your book too, I remember, I mean, the support system was incredible. And yeah, I mean, everybody was helping you with whether it was like staying at their house or coming over. It sounded like trading off days to kind of help you on the day to day. I think that community system is important when you get taken away from that thing that you enjoy doing most. It's like your stress relief, right?
Yeah, I know. It was really hard. I mean, I felt like it was a very big adjustment. Like I felt like a lack of identity, but the community aspect, it really helped.
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, I'm obviously, just from my bio and too, just about me, like there's more than to me than just a runner, but you can kind of quickly get caught up in that. So it was also an opportunity for me to kind of like dive into other areas that were, that made me a full person.
Yeah.
And it also made me happy, but maybe I'd just kind of forgotten about.
Yes. And then did I hear you say in your book that with the accident, you had a minor concussion as well?
Yeah. Definitely. I don't know how I didn't have like a fracture of my skull. Honestly, I have no idea, but my hands are both my wrists were very badly broken. So I think I was like protecting my head.
Wow. Yeah. Did you do any specific concussion, like protocol recovery after that? Or was it more like the rest of the body got a lot of attention?
Yeah. So the rest of the body did get a lot of attention, but I mean, doing PT stuff and doing all of that, it engages the brain a lot. And actually the more papers that I read about like, TBIs, the best mode of action is to not just like sit in a dark room, like just be quiet, no human interaction, right? Like maybe you'll be a little bit tired, but like for me, I actually went back to work. I was a teacher at a small college and I was teaching anatomy and physiology, biology, chemistry. And I actually went back to work, and I think that was essential for me to start to like assimilate back into society, to like use my brain. But the one symptom I did notice is that I was really tired. And so I had to like take care of that. But I think the more research that we learn about the brain is that it is better when used, right? And so it's just like any other thing, like previously in physical therapy, like if you twist your ankle, like, oh, rest and ice it. That's not the protocol anymore. Like you're immediately supposed to move it. And so that's what I did. No, it wasn't anything. I guess for some people they'd say like, oh, you're teaching chemistry and anatomy and physiology. That seems like pretty high level, but that's to me, like, I know that stuff. So it was good. It was a good way for me to engage with people, but also to get out of the house and also just to use my brain. That's
awesome. And from your book too, I don't want to tell our whole book for the listeners, but you used the anatomy classes. And I think you even gave like physics examples of your accident situation for your students, which I'm sure, put things into that like realistic example situation for sure for them to remember, right?
It was actually really funny because that semester I was teaching intro to physics. So we had like, it's like half physics, half chemistry. And then it's for people who weren't quite so sure they like science, but then I convinced them at the end that science was the coolest. But then the other one is anatomy and physiology. So my anatomy and physiology class, like the first quiz that I had, I was like, okay, well, we're going to go over the human body and the bones, and you guys are going to name all of these bones that I broke during this fall. Cause it's kind of alarming when like a teacher scoots in on a scooter and like, has a basket cause she can't, you know what I mean? It's like, it was quite an ordeal. They're like, oh wow, she's my teacher. And then, and then in the physics class, it was like basically calculating my terminal velocity as I like for falling this far, like using like Newton's first, second, third laws. And I will say that when I tested the students over these principles and like use these examples, no one got it wrong. So that
amazing.
was,
that's so cool. I mean, it's neat to be able to talk about that after the fact, but then be able to share that and apply that in situations to help you're helping these kiddos as well. So that's amazing. So I'd love to dive into a little bit of, fueling of these efforts, but I also want to talk about goodness, elevation and all things of that nature. But do you ever do any training at sea level out of curiosity?
Well, yeah, actually,
Okay.
when I trained for these races, like in Europe, I mean, Europe is basically at sea level or like 1,000 feet. So usually if I'm there, like I was at UTMB for a month before, or I was at a race out on the West Coast in Oregon. So I'd be there, but yes, I'm based in Boulder. So majority of my training is technically at altitude. And for that San Juan Solstice race that you mentioned, that race runs, it's a 50-mile race, but like what? 20 miles of it are above 13,000 feet. And so I put a really big block like above 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
But I love that. So
yeah, that's awesome. So with something like that, I mean, if we step back, like maybe like a month or several weeks before you leave for an event like that is at 13,000 feet, like what does preparation look like for that? I've heard some athletes will do like sauna protocol or heat exposure and stuff like that. Are you doing stuff like that?
For me, no, because I live at altitude. So I can actually go and I can train in it. So for athletes, actually, so I'm a running coach and that's what I prescribe for people who don't live at altitude and they can maybe only get up there for like a weekend at a time. A sauna protocol is basically kind of physiologically, it's mimicking the response that your body goes into at altitude. It's effectively dehydrating you, which actually like basically tells your body to produce more EPO, which makes more red blood cells. So it's the quickest thing that you can do. Obviously sauna protocols can help for training for hot races too, but there is like a kind of that altitude mimicry, I guess, that you can do. But no, I just trained at altitude because I could. It was only a 2-hour drive away. I could go park my van and camp at 10,000 feet and then go run on some 14ers.
It's amazing. So what does your hydration game plan change when you're doing training sessions like at that high? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, yes, even though I live in Boulder and it's like 5,000 feet, going up to 10,000 feet, like one of the biggest things for altitude sickness is like dehydration. Yeah. And so then you can be like acutely anemic. And so before your body has a chance to make more red blood cells, which takes on the order of like 21 days or 18 days, I forget, somewhere in there, around the range of 3 weeks. So, I was up there, at least 3 weeks before the race, by like a month or, doing these runs. I started like my first kind of altitude block up at high altitude, about like 6 weeks before. And yeah, so basically the main thing with dehydration is I just had to make sure that I kind of relied on more liquid calories and that I had the appropriate electrolytes. I just made sure, that I had that dialed and that I was using that. Cause sometimes in races, like, unless, if it's hot, I usually drink to thirst. That's a really good cue for you. But, I needed some extra electrolytes. So basically what I did for the high altitude races, I usually race with one bottle that has water and one with electrolytes. And for this specific high altitude race, I raced with both of my bottles that had electrolytes in them. And so I did notice at the end, I was like, I could just use some water, but I did have aid stations for that to kind of chug it. But it worked really well. Actually, I had no stomach issues for the whole race, which was awesome.
Yes, that is always awesome when that happens, especially for that duration, right? So you were able to, I mean, I don't know if you're testing hydration status, but you were able to do the same amount of fluid, but increase electrolytes per hour, it sounds like. And that helped, with the performance at that level, you're saying?
Basically, yeah, because like, and this is something that I had trained, right? Because I kind of know physiologically speaking what happens to your body at altitude. So I just wanted to make sure this was like the right protocol. So I basically did this in training where I had 2 bottles of electrolytes and then I had a third flask with just water. So if I felt thirsty for just water, then I could just take a sip.
Nice.
And it seemed to work really well. And I noticed it helped in my recovery. Like I didn't feel as like flat, like maybe I didn't have as much kind of like loss of salt on my shirts when I was done. That first run was a shocker. That first run at altitude, I was like, oh man, okay, like let's like figure this out. And I've used like Scratch Labs before.
Oh yeah.
And I've had the salinity of my sweat tested.
Nice.
And so I knew that like around the 8-hour mark, I might need a hyper salty solution. And so I kind of used that in the race as well.
Okay, nice. Is that like a preload or one of their
I think now it used to be called hyperhydration. Now I think it's called rescue, but it just basically has twice the salt content as regular Scratch.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And I do that for longer races too, not just high altitude.
Okay. So it at the 8-hour mark, you're utilizing a rescue serving. And then, do you ever use that in preparation too, in the days leading up to like
honestly, if I fly, I try to drink a lot more electrolytes. And usually I'm having like noon tabs, or I have like a little, like a magnesium kind of fizzy thing I can put in my water. So yeah, for sure. And especially with flying, I feel like it dehydrates you so much. But the week of, I try to have things like Scratch has this thing called like daily hydration too. So I was kind of adding those things in as well.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. I think it's helpful for people to understand that too. I think I was just talking to one of my friends who does more gravel stuff, but he was saying he's from here, the Bay Area, which is like basically sea level. And he went to Colorado, and he said he went from drinking 1 bottle an hour to 3 bottles an hour. So he could be a pretty serious sweater. For sure. I don't know if he's ever had it tested, but yeah, I think it is. But mentioning just increasing electrolytes, I would imagine that's also helping you retain more of your water too, a bit as well. So, I think that's a good call for people to hear. And so we know you change fluid intake, add some electrolytes, but what does nutrition look like? Or like, how do you prep for 24 plus hours of nutrition?
So and to add another wrench to the mix, UTMB, it starts at 6 p.m. Okay. So you start running through the night. So one thing, like I mentioned, I'm a pretty big science nerd. So
let's geek out.
So like, I wanted to be careful with caffeine. I didn't want to start right away because like with caffeine, you inevitably have a crash. Yeah. And I knew that the adrenaline of the race was going to keep me going. And so what I did like early on is I actually had some bars and food that had protein in it, because protein helps with like wakefulness. So basically my first caffeine I didn't ingest till about like 3 or 4 in the morning, because that's kind of when you naturally get sleepy. I actually didn't really feel sleepy, but I still kind of like had the caffeine protocol, like when the sun come up, like when I would normally have my coffee and, like stuff like that. And then I kind of kept caffeine on board for the rest of the day, like every 2 hours or so, just so I kind of like kept it steady, like having something with one piece of caffeine. But I also kept the protein, like the bars that had like a little bit of protein and fat in it. And the really key for me, I also had gels. Like I was just kind of like mixing it up. Yeah. But the key thing for me was at aid stations is to eat real food, because with a race with this much elevation gain, your body needs to feel a little bit of like satiation. And you are using so much energy. And so you just need to replenish it as best you can. And real food to me was really key, because I think one mistake that people make in running, and I certainly made this early on, was solely relying on gels. And what ends up happening is if it's a very concentrated sugar solution, it just dehydrates you, because you drink water, but you need to like literally dilute the sugar in your stomach in order for it to be absorbed. So you get dehydrated, but then also the B is that the gels can just stay in your stomach. And what people forget, and this is from my experience as an anatomy teacher, digestion starts in the mouth. Like when you start chewing and generating saliva, like that's literally the first mechanical cue that your stomach is like, okay, like let's get ready for some food. And so if you forget to chew and you're just like swallowing these things, your stomach's like, well, what the hell? Like, are you gonna feed me? And so it just kind of like sits there. And so for me, it's essential to have something that I'm chewing. So that was like the bars in addition to the gels, and then in addition to real food, something that had fat, protein, and carbs in it.
It's awesome. Yeah. I think that's definitely helpful for people to hear. And I think too, mean, 24 plus hours of solely gels must get like sickening after a while.
No.
you know,
not fun.
What's your kind of go-to? I mean, you mentioned real food, obviously at the aid stations, but are there any bars or products that you like or prefer work well for you when you're racing?
Yeah. So I'm sponsored by The Feed, which is
nice,
amazing because they have like, basically it's a one-stop shop for everything. They carry all of these different brands. And so I can mix and match because that's something that's always worked well for me. I mentioned Scratch. I used to run for them, but now with The Feed is I can also use Scratch, and then I can also use Goo, and I can also use like, Cliff or Spring Energy. But the main things that I used were Spring Energy, and Never Second. These are 2 gels.
Yeah.
I use Scratch Labs for the drink mix, and then I used this. It's called JoJ Bar.
Yes, we had Sarah on our podcast. She's amazing. Yeah,
she's also a teammate of mine over at the Pinarello. I'm on the gravel.
Amazing.
Yeah, the gravel cycling team. So
heck yeah,
I love hers because they're just like homemade bars. They're made with great ingredients. They have fat, protein, and carbs.
Yeah.
And so that worked really well for me. And then I also played around with some other, it was called NAC. I
haven't heard of that.
It's a brand out of Quebec.
Okay.
But they're in Europe because they're obviously French. They're trying to get on the US market. So look out for them. I really like their brand because they are very sustainable, like their packaging, but also they have protein to carbs is like 4 to 1.
Wow.
So I think I'm getting that right. Yeah. But
that's great.
So that was something that I was using. They had some like caffeine ones too. But yeah, it was just like kind of the whole combo. And then, the French tart at the aid stations, that was nice.
Awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. So when you're racing like this and you have some things, I would imagine like on your person for fuel, or in the bottle or anything like that, how often are you trying to like sip or take a bite? Do you have a timeline? Are you setting a timer on your watch, or how do you?
So I don't set a timer on my watch, but I do have like the time running. And so I try to eat if it's like a bar, usually they're a bit denser. So I usually have like half of one every 30 minutes. But I'm trying to eat every 30 minutes. And if something doesn't feel good, like if like my stomach is kind of a little bit like revolting, I'll just take small bites throughout the hour and then make sure I kind of finish it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if I forget, or like I look at my watch, I'm like, oh, okay, like this much time has passed. I'll like, but I'm feeling good that I can kind of eat the 200 calories on that hour mark. But usually I try to aim between 200 and 300 an hour.
Nice. Yeah. And you were saying too, in the beginning, that could be a combination of protein, fats, and carbs, and then could be more carb dominant during certain hours, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And like kind of towards the end, if you don't feel like eating a lot, I was relying more on gels. It's like that quick energy.
Yeah.
But I think they were still feeling good to me because I had been eating like real food all day.
Yeah, that's good. So it sounds like you go off of a calorie per hour kind of goal versus a carbohydrate per.
I think it's kind of a mix. But yeah, because the effort for these long races, it's like more of like the slow burn, right? So I know for Never Second, they have, I think it's like what is it? Is it a 40 carb per hour or like a 60? Usually I'm using maybe I'm getting it if it's like 30 and 60, maybe I'm getting the numbers wrong, but I usually do the lower carb one because it's just, you're basically, it's kind of like, you just want that slow release of energy, that constant release of energy all day. If I was doing like a faster 50K, I might rely more on like the higher carb concentration every hour, just because you're moving a lot faster. But usually that's why I kind of go to the 200 to 300 calorie an hour. Kind of
nice
range.
I think that's great and helpful for definitely listeners to hear. I mean, I think many of them too can like go, like you're saying, without eating or forget to eat. And then they hit that hour mark on their watch and then they try and like slam, 2 bars and a gel, or something. And it's just too much for the gut. So having those intervals of timing to eat is definitely a good move to minimize that GI distress, I think, that many people can get. And what does recovery look like for you after an event like that? Do you have an appetite at all after something like that?
So it's kind of insane because you're like, your body is so confused. I wasn't really sleepy. But like, I was ready. I was hungry, but like, I couldn't eat right away. So it's like, I really wanted to sleep, but I was also hungry.
Yeah. So
basically what happened, but you can't really eat that much afterwards because I think you're a little bit sick of like the sweet. But yeah, so basically what happened is I showered and just drinking a lot of water because you still have to do that. And then tried to kind of get that like the dirt off and like all, like just to feel like a human again. And then I like tried to eat the best I could, and usually for me that's like salty and savory foods. Like honestly, like rice with butter or like French fries is like really good. And then I usually try to go to sleep, which is kind of painful because your legs are like you're just hot. But usually what I do is I go to sleep with the food by my bed and then the extra water, and then I usually wake up in the middle of the night and then like snack. Eat it and then go back to bed.
Gotta keep like recovering and replenishing all the glycogen you've depleted out.
But then honestly the next day it's like you really have to pay attention. Like I was very, very hungry the following day. So it's just like and that I think it's just really I was really adamant about making sure I got everything in. Like I wasn't running at all the week after UTMB, and I just made sure that I was eating a lot and, you know, my listening to my hunger, and definitely getting in a lot of protein and carbs just to replace the glycogen, but also rebuild the muscles that I had damaged. So
that's awesome. I think, people again also can run into that mistake where it's like, okay, well, the race was yesterday. I had French fries and a pizza and a milkshake or whatever. And then they try and get back to kind of resting, but then not eating enough. Right. And the hunger creeps up, I think, on many people, and they end up diving into, I don't know, bags of popcorn and pretzels and you name it.
Which is fine, but but it's the stuff that doesn't really feed you up or fill you up, I guess. And of course I was eating that stuff too, just because I was like, give me all the things. But like, you know, it's like the real stuff. And I really like to cook. So that,
that's awesome.
That helps too.
I love the fact that you have the background that you have in education too, I'm sure is, God have given you all kinds of like tips and ideas for your own, and like just thinking about what's happening in your body, because, you know, like you're talking about your digestion and all that stuff. It's like, you kind of have that thought process to like run through to like, kind of like assess why things are happening or not working the way you want them to. Right. I think that's probably such a great tool to have. That's awesome. So, what do you have next coming up on the calendar for you? Any more races this year? Do you ever have an off season?
Yes, I do have an off season, and I actually really enjoy off season. So this year, actually, I do have one more race. And I'm not sure when this podcast will be live, but I'll tell you guys. I'm going to be running Ultra Trail Cape Town. I've never been to South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And actually the bonus is that I'm running their 100-mile race, which it's the first year that they're going to have this. And so, although UTMB was challenging for me, didn't go as planned. But ironically, we're talking about nutrition. I did have some stomach issues that I was problem solving in UTMB, like the early 50-mile, but I think it was like it was maybe more of like a stomach bug. Yeah. But like, just cause like, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom when I started eating, and I was just like, oh no, what do I do? Yeah. And so basically it was cool. I basically just got to the halfway point, took some extra minutes to eat a lot of real food. And then I got my nutrition back on track. And then I was able to like crush the rest of the race. Like I fell down to 30th place and I finished in 14th, and I out-sprinted a woman in the city center to get 14th.
Oh my goodness.
So nutrition, there's been like amazing things that can happen. And I practice mine all the time, but sometimes like certain unpredictable things happen, but you can still problem solve them in the moment. So I'm doing the Ultra Trail Cape Town, the 100-miler, November 25th.
Amazing.
And the reason being is just because like, I'm curious about these 100-milers. UTMB was my first 100. And I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm excited to kind of, to see to see what it's all about, to like try it
Yeah.
again and like, you know, attack the nutrition strategy again and explore a new place. And
Totally.
yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of recovery, but like, you know, if you rest after the race, like I was really surprised at how quickly like physically I recovered, but then
Amazing.
mentally too. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm super pumped for you, and that's exciting. With something like that too, do you go down there like 3 weeks ahead of time too?
Well,
or
so, you know, ideally that'd be great, but this time it's not going to work out. So I'm actually going to arrive the Monday before the race, and it's a lot of travel to get there.
Yeah.
But you know, I'll just sleep, eat, drink, and see what happens. Like it's kind of like it's like a toss. Like I was there, you know, 3 weeks before for UTMB, and sometimes it doesn't go perfectly. So might as well try something different this time.
See what happens. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of your time. So I'm going to touch back on your 2 truths and a lie.
Nice.
And if you could just say them again, what they were, and then and Nia and I will well, we said the bug thing we think is a lie, but if you could read them again and then tell us which one is the lie.
Yeah. So the first 3 facts. I hate bugs. I have a degree in organic chemistry, and I wrote my first book when I was in kindergarten. Those are the.
Okay.
Those are
so I think you like bugs.
So what? Yeah, you guys are right. I love bugs. That was the lie.
Okay. Yeah.
I love bugs, including spiders.
Oh my goodness.
People will be scared of them. I'll literally put them on my hand and like rescue them and put them outside. With the exception of a black widow, I will use a piece of paper, but I will still move it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think I saw a picture of you on your Instagram, like holding a frog or something. And I was like, she digs nature. Yeah.
I love it. Literally, that was my favorite thing. At post UTMB, I could literally just go looking for bugs and frogs and lizards. And I found so many of them. It was amazing.
That's the coolest part about running outside or biking outside, right? You get to see all the nature things. And yeah, I was on my like run the other day, and I stopped and had to take a picture and send my husband like biggest praying mantis I've like ever seen. Yeah.
I literally stopped on my bike ride. Like I like skidded to a stop because I saw this big lady on the side of the road. So I picked her up too. I love those.
Well, so when I like went to go take a picture, it like did the thing where it like went like this, you know, it like puts its arms up and then it's like fluffed up its little like butt feathers, or not feathers, but like wings.
The wings, yeah.
It was pretty cool, but yeah, so Nia and I, we got it right. And Nia, you should have guessed a different one next time, because I listened to the audiobook. So I thought I was like for sure right. But this is awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you guys listening, Hillary's book is called Out and Back. And I think I got it on Audible, but I'm sure it can be found on Amazon and stuff like that. And we'll include links in the show notes. But where can people find you, Hillary?
Yeah. So all the information you need, it's like a one-stop shop at my website, hillaryallen.com. And it's got links to my, my book. It's got links to, you know, like races, at anything you need, coaching. And also, I don't know if you know, but Will Benitez, he's a friend of mine. I've worked with him before. He's a nutritionist out of Bend, Oregon. Awesome. We're actually launching a nutrition course. So basically I'll touch on some training things. He'll touch on some nutrition things, and basically, you know, how you can basically improve these over the course of the season. So this is something we're going to be teasing out for the fall and spring. So you can find some info on that for my website too.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been a wealth of information. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me.